Hey, Michael, X-Force PC. So I wanted to talk about the new AMD 9800X3D that just came out, new processor. This is the successor to the 7800X3D, which has been so great. This uses AMD's 3D V-Cache, and what that essentially means is cache is really fast RAM that is put onto the processor die itself. So you think of RAM as system memory, there's these sticks of RAM you put into the motherboard, but those are actually slow by comparison to the RAM that's housed directly on the processor die. And so AMD found, hey, we can put as much RAM as possible on memory, I should say, on the chip. That's going to dramatically improve gaming performance. So what they did is they stacked that RAM on top of the processor circuitry. So you have the processor circuitry here, and they just piled that. That's why it's called 3D V-Cache. They piled that cache up on top of the processor die. And that just makes gaming dramatically faster. But they said, for the 9800X3D, we want to do something better. And we want to take it to the next level. And they've done that. And we'll talk about how they did that in just a minute, in rudimentary terms. But as far as performance goes, I'm going to put my latest benchmarks that I've run. I don't have a lot of time to run benchmarks, but I ran a few for X-Plane. I know a lot of people don't benchmark X-Plane, so I did that. There'll be a link in the video description to my Excel spreadsheet. Essentially, the 9800X3D is 17% faster than the predecessor to the 7800X3D. Again, about 17% faster. It also makes it about 20% faster than the i9-14900K. Again, 20% faster than the 14900K, which makes it about 25% faster than Intel's new Core Ultra 285, Core Ultra 9 285K. It's their new chip that's supposed to replace the i9, but it's actually slower, which is weird. But that's a different video. Essentially, 17 to 25% faster than what was or is considered, other than this chip, to be the fastest. So it kind of sets itself apart. And in Microsoft Flight Sim, it can be like 30% faster than the i9. So it can't even be more dramatic. So let's talk about how they were able to achieve this. I'm going to go over to my dry erase board here. Hopefully my friend, the tracking camera, will track me okay. So let's take the processor, and this is a side view. So, a processor, is a little flat thing about this big or so. This is a side view, and this is a very rudimentary thing I'm going to do here. But on the 7800X3D, imagine you have X3D. Imagine you have the processor circuitry down here. I'm just going to draw some supposed circuits here. And then on top of that, you have the cache, this fancy memory stacked on top. And it's just piled up here. And that's what gives you, that great performance boost. And then on top of that, you have some sort of cooler. I'm just going to write the word cooler up here. And the heat, has to go up into the cooler like that. Well, the problem that they had with the 7800X3D is they couldn't send a lot of power to the chip. It didn't boost very fast. The clock speeds were actually relatively low, even though it performs great in gaming. Clock speeds were actually fairly low. And that's because the blue down here, the chip, the processor, is what produces the heat. And to get to the cooler, it had to go through or around all this 3D V-Cache, which is heat sensitive. Doesn't like a lot of heat. So they really couldn't send more than about 80, I think I see about 80 watts or so, 80, 90 watts maybe, to these chips. An Intel chip will draw 250, sometimes 300 watts, which is a lot. So what they did on the 9800X3D, X3D, so you have the same, processor here. And instead, they put the processing circuitry up here against where the cooler is, and then they put the 3D V-cache down here underneath it. The 3D V-cache really doesn't need a lot of cooling. It doesn't produce a lot of heat. So now you've got your cooler. I don't know why I'm writing so small, but you got your cooler up here right against this blue area, which is the stuff, the processing that produces all the heat. So you've got your heat producing stuff right next to the cooler, as opposed to your heat producing stuff down here in the bottom, and all that heat has to go through the 3D V-cache to get to the cooler. What that allowed them to do now is they can now send more power to the chip. I think I'm seeing 120, 150 watts, something like that, off the top of my head. I think it's around 150. I should have looked before I came in here. But it's more power. Instead of like 80 or so watts, you know, it's over 100, 120, 150, something like that. That allows it to boost higher. So you're getting higher clock speeds, which helps in your instructions per clock, your performance per thread, because a lot of games, especially like X-Plane, rely on, they want a really, really fast single thread. So single threaded performance is greatly improved. The other thing that has helped is it's based on their Zen 5 architecture. It's just an updated architecture. It does help with performance a little bit, nothing, you know, dramatic, but again, it is based on Zen 5 as opposed to, I don't know, I guess this is Zen 4. I know there's like all these Zen Plus, Zen whatever. Anyway, it's the new Zen 5 architecture, and that gives you a little bit of a boost as well. So now in gaming, you know, it can be anywhere from 5 to 30 or 40%, depending on the game, faster than the already was the fastest 7800 X3D. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into the 9800 X3D. I'm no uber expert. This is just the Cliff Notes version of the changes that were made. Very simple, flipping the 3D V-cache and the circuitry, and then the move to Zen 5, and the ability to send more power to the chip to get higher clock speeds. So that's pretty much the rundown of it. The one thing about it that it changes for us significantly is I really need to use water cooling now for this. You can use an air cooler if you use a real beefy, bulky, sizable air cooler on the 9800 X3D, but that's not good for us for shipping, because those tend to get bent and damaged in shipping. If we've got to go to a bulky tower, you know, a small tower air cooler is fine, but to a bulky tower air cooler, we'd rather just go to water cooling. So that's what we're doing with the 9800 X3D.